I thought I would share some helpful information on grief. We often come to this world with no instructions, no information. We live in a grief illiterate society. So I wanted to pass along some information that I've learned about grief. First of all, grief is what's on the inside. Mourning is what we do on the outside. No one can see our grief. And when we think about our grief, we all grieve in our very unique way. In fact, our grief is as unique as our fingerprint. No one person grieves like another. Many times, people try to compare grief. And when you compare, first of all, if you win, you lose. And it should be a no judgment zone. And when we begin to compare, things go wrong. I know so many times someone will share their loss and someone immediately go, well, here's what happened in my loss and here's what my grief was like. And your grief is different from what they went through. We all experience this differently. Really what we want from one another is we want our grief to be witnessed. We want our pain to be seen, to be heard. We weren't meant to be islands of grief. So our work is to help people understand our grief isn't to be fixed, it's to be honored. I'm David Kessler. Many of you know my work. I've written a number of books. I wrote The Needs of the Dying years ago about end-of-life care from my experience in the hospital, and I became a grief specialist. I did 2 books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. On Grief and Grieving is probably the most well-known, and on page 1 we tell people, Elizabeth and I, that the stages aren't the only model. You don't follow the stages. They don't have to occur in any order. I always like to remind people of that because they often get misinterpreted. And then after decades of working in this field, a few years ago, my younger son, David, died unexpectedly. It's as brutal then as it is now. And I wanted to find a way to deal with that pain. I wanted to write a note to every person I counseled saying I'd forgotten how bad the pain was. And after a while, when it was time for me to begin to deal with acceptance, it wasn't enough. I wanted to find meaning. So I interviewed, people who had had a spouse die, a parent die, a sibling die, a child die. And I ended up writing this book, Finding Meaning, the 6th Stage of Grief. Meaning doesn't take away the pain, but it's a cushion. And meaning isn't in their tragic death. Meaning is what we do afterwards. How we live in the world without them and find ways to honor them. So what is grief? Grief is a reflection of a connection that has been lost. We physically connected with one another and someone important to us died. But in this video, I really want to focus on the hardest one we deal with on this journey, having a loved one die. So when we talk about that, I often tell people grief is an organic process. You actually don't need a grief model to know how to grieve, or steps or stages or anything like that. Your soul and psyche knows how to do this. It's our modern world that's confused us, telling us you've got 3 days or 6 months or 1 month or a year and then you should be over it. That's the misinformation about grief. And there's so many expectations out there of how we should grieve. And our work is to discover our unique way. We're often afraid the pain is going to be too much. And grief is painful. But I've also learned there's no way out of the pain except through the pain. And you can't heal what you don't feel. And healing does not mean forgetting. We will never forget our loved ones. It means we figure out how to live in the world without them and find a way to love them in their absence and to honor them. We run from it, hoping it will disappear, and yet it stays behind us throughout our whole life. And we fight it and we want it to be over. And if there was a magic way to tell you to get over it, I would. But there's no getting over or recovering from our loved ones. They weren't a cold or a flu. We don't recover from them. We want to learn to live with the loss in a way that honors them. And there are people out there that will tell you to get over it or move on. And they do not understand grief. A lot of my work is teaching people how to deal with all the others who don't get it. You know, our friends and family, we think the people who are closest to us are going to get it. And it's shocking that they're the ones sometimes that can be the least supportive. They don't understand how to do it. Their grief is different than ours. Part of this work is knowing how to be a listening presence, to see people in grief, to witness, to hear them. You know, grief must be witnessed. We can't try to cheer people up or get them out of it. So many times people listen to respond. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Instead of listening to understand us and our loss and what we've been through. In grief, you need a community. We often isolate in grief, and it's a very isolating world we live in. We have social distancing. We can't connect. People don't want to talk about it. And how do we connect with one another? And like I said, the people who we would usually turn to may actually be the ones that don't get it. So they may even have their own loss that's the same as ours. Your mom died, but your siblings are grieving differently. Maybe your child died. Your spouse is dealing with it differently. So having a community, people in grief since the beginning of time have been seeking one another out. Really finding community, whatever that looks like for you, is so important in self-care. We're also in this culture of positivity. You know, to think positively and celebrate life, and maybe we thought positively and we prayed and we yearned for our loved one to get better and we sought out the best treatment or fought that addiction so hard or fought with their mental illness, and yet they still died. And we have to learn to live with that. So how do we do that? I want to just give you some ideas that may help you. One of the concepts I often talk about is pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is part of the love. I would never take the pain away. That pain is in proportion to how much you love the person who died. Suffering is what your mind does. It's the blame, the what ifs, if onlys, the bringing the horrible images back, the last days, all of that your mind can do. Our minds can be so cruel to us in grief. Our mind can put it on a timeline. It can tell us we should be further along than we are. You know, as I mentioned, we don't recover from grief. My son dying, that's going to be forever my cherished wound. I'm living with that. And I still can be whole, but I will be different. I will be forever changed because of my son and because of his death. Same with my mother and father. The work is to try to remember with more love than pain in our own way. Guilt is also a horrible thing our mind does to us. We judge ourselves. We're doing it wrong. We should be further along. There's no way to do grief wrong. There's your way. There's only your way to do grief. And we often think if we had done something differently, our loved ones would have died. But many times, despite our best efforts, our loved ones still die. It's why I like to really work with people and help them understand brain science and why our brain will turn on itself. You know, we don't understand why our mind is like Teflon for the good memories and Velcro for the bad ones, and how things stick, and those traumatic images we have of the last day or the last time keep haunting us. Once you understand the brain science behind it, you begin to see that there is a way out to really find more love than pain. And so many times people expect us to do that and our mind to work through those things in the first month, in the first year. And that's not how it works. But we have to go through that experience. And in time, we will find the love, the pure grief. And to remember, there is no timeline in grief. People will say to me, well, they'll hear me use the phrase early grief. And they'll go, well, when's early grief? The first month, the first few weeks? Early grief for me is the first 2 years. That's the first 2 years that's early grief. When grief comes along, we're often afraid to get support. And there's no way around it. There's only through it. And grief is really about the love you had. It's the evidence that someone existed who meant the world to you. And if you have 1,000 tears to cry or 10,000 tears to cry, you can't stop at 200. You know, we think as time passes, we're so afraid we may forget our loved one. My mother died over 45 years ago. Never forgetting her. In my heart always. And it's interesting, same with my father. And we get so afraid as time goes on, we're going to lose them. And I tell people, you will get further from the date of their death, but not further from them. You know, we get so afraid that if we release any pain, we'll lose the connection to them. And that's just not true. And it certainly doesn't have to be. You know, we have to create a new life that honors them, that loves them in their absence. I don't believe when a loved one dies, we quit loving them. And in fact, I don't think they quit loving us. We have to create a new relationship. And memories are our cushion in that relationship. In Finding Meaning, I talk about one of the ways we find meaning is this idea, when a loved one dies, it feels like a part of us dies with them. But there's also a part of them that lives within us. And our work and the meaning sometimes is to work with that pain and allow that pain, but also nurture that part of them that lives within us. So I hope this information was helpful to you and that you will find different ways to apply this and that you'll get support. Wherever you get help and support, please do it. You don't have to do this alone. And I so appreciate you taking the time to be here. I'm David Kessler, and I'm sending you much love. Take care.